The ashes of today are the sparks of tomorrow by XX Misery Smiles XX. Read by Kaiinbed. Chapter 39. Natsu woke up to the sweet smell of vanilla, the scent of shampoo Tumblr used in the rare occasion she tried to wrangle any sort of coherence out of her thick white waves. She let him wash it last night, a modern miracle, though it seemed to be more that she'd simply been too emotionally drained to argue. Natsu had to admit that in itself was somewhat worrying, as Tumblr made complaining an Olympic sport. Propping himself up with an elbow, Natsu danced his fingers along the scarred surface of Tomura's arm, watching her downy eyelashes brush against her cheeks, red eyes squinting in bleary confusion as she was nudged awake. "Hey, gorgeous," Natsu murmured, smiling and leaning down to press a kiss to his snowy goddess's temple. Tomura huffed, batting at him grouchily. "Get your paws off me, pervert. I haven't even brushed my teeth yet." She groused, shifting over to snuggle closer into his side and tacking on a "fucking simp" to her sentiment. Natsu let out a low, breathy laugh as she wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest and letting out a contented-sounding sigh. They called Tomura's physician last night, who'd given them the go-ahead to go back to the leftover supply of her old meds until they could meet in person next week and figure out what to do. He'd expected to have to argue for it. Her trademark stubbornness was especially bad when it came to the dreaded expectation of taking care of her own health, but she seemed too exhausted to do much more than nod, leaning against his side. "You want to go out for breakfast, or just stay here?" Natsu asked, petting Tomura's hair and taking his phone off its charger to make sure he hadn't missed anything over the night hours. "Can you make tamagoyaki again?" She grumbled, and Natsu nodded, a headline catching his eye. "Are you gonna have anything that isn't some variation of bread or eggs?" he teased, and could feel her scowl. "I had ramen yesterday. Noodles. Type of bread. Ajitama. Type of egg," he listed. "Miso?" she questioned, and Natsu rolled his eyes. "Yes, sorry. Flavorless salt water. The height of adventurous eating." This earned him a sleepy red-eyed glare, which leaned a bit much on the sleepy kitten side to be taken seriously. Natsu scrolled through the article, giving a distracted hum and copying the link before he responded. Natsu: "Hey, you guys okay?" Hawks: "Yeah, don't worry. Tumblr didn't traumatize us that much." Natsu: "No, I mean, have you seen the news?" Hawks: "Something happened, didn't it?" Natsu: "Oh God." Official Hero News Tumblr. After weeks of speculation, the identity of number 1 Pro Hero Hawks' boyfriend has been revealed to be none other than infamous supervillain Dabi. Read more. 400k notes. At What the Hawks. This was not on my bingo card. At The Surreal Slim Shady. Hawks for real stole Endeavor's number 1 spot, then went further and stole his son. Say what you want, but honestly, you gotta respect the hustle. At Carry On, My Dear Watson. What the hell did the Japanese Birdman do this time? I swear to God, every 3 days he shows up on my homepage either faking his death or murdering the president. I no longer believe this man is real. At Just There for the Cake. Whoever started calling this Hogsgate on Twitter, I have a knife and am in your walls. At TV Dinner Kinda Girl. I mean, isn't it kinda obvious that he's just using him to gain public sympathy? I honestly am not gonna judge Hawks because my mutuals all know I've been through it with manipulators, but absolutely no leeway for Dabi. Once a villain, always a villain. At Pierce the Black Veil Sirens. Dabi's just using him for his money/status. What if he just wants that bird dick like all you thirsty hoes seem to? At Wool Over My Eyes. Opens Tumblr, sees whatever the fuck is going on here, closes Tumblr. Well, that's enough internet for today. Back to my silly little games and dino nuggets. At Jemini Truther 69. I'm sorry, but I just can't with all of you just supporting this man. Who in the world that claims to be a hero would actively support putting absolutely despicable people like this back into society? At Dabi's Massive Tits. Y'all be hating on me for being a massive Dobby apologist, and now when the #1 whore does it, it's okay? Valid, honestly. Hawks was panicking, pacing back and forth across the tiled floor, wings aflutter and voice breaking with stressed chitters and chirps. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Everyone's gonna recognize us now, and you won't have any peace or be able to go anywhere. This would have never happened if I hadn't been so stupid. Dobby shook his head from where he sat against the wall, watching his boyfriend freak out. He was scrolling through Twitter, waiting for Hawks to run out of breath so he could speak. Finally, he gave up, glancing down and breaking the stream of anxious stammering. Being a real hero is knowing that everyone deserves a second chance. I stand with Hawks. Dobby read out. Hawks looked up, staring blankly. Dobby continued. That was tweeted by All Might 2 hours ago. Hawks blinked, mouth open, but no response came out. So Dobby kept scrolling, going through each post. If you can accept not all heroes are perfect, then you can accept not all villains are evil. I stand with Hawks. That was from Edgeshot. Say what you will about him, but this is the first time I've seen Hawks laugh without looking sad. I stand with Hawks. Miss Joke. The more I learn about Endeavor and the Commission, the more I realize society doesn't have a right to say who is and isn't a villain. I stand with our #1. That was from Mount Lady. What? Hawks said finally. People are on your side, Keigo. Dobby said softly, blinking soft white lashes at him. Hawks walked forwards, stumbling over his feet to peer at the feed. Dobby let him read, smiling softly when Hawks sat down with an open-mouthed wonder. Oh. Besides, Dobby breathed, I don't give a fuck what they're saying. This is our relationship, not theirs. Hawks breathed out, turning his head and letting Dobby put his mouth over his smooth lips. Let's not stress so much on my big day. Okay, Hawks finally conceded, kissing him back and running a hand through locks of white. Hawks, not for the first time, had to marvel at how absolutely drop-dead gorgeous his mate was. Those sparkling blue eyes, plush peach lips, smooth pale skin, and soft snowfall hair. He couldn't not melt his own lips to Toby's neck, biting down and leaving fluttery pink marks across the skin. I got you something to celebrate, he murmured, leaning back and taking in Dobby's softly surprised expression. You didn't have to, Dobby grumbled, turning away as a rosy flush tinged his cheeks. Hawk smiled, shaking his head and turning to grab the box off his nightstand. Passing it over and dropping it into Dobby's open palm, he sat back and waited for Dobby to open it. Dobby took a long second, then carefully pulled the azure string off the top, opening it open and letting out a soft gasp. Sliding 2 slender fingers in, he pulled out the silver chain, letting the shimmering blue triangular stone at the end catch the light in the shimmery waterfall. Hawks keened at the wonder in Dobby's eyes, happy he had done well for his mate. You like old movies, and this one was modeled after the necklace from Titanic, and I remembered you mentioning you watched it, and so I just... He was cut off as Dobby grabbed his face, kissing him hard on the lips before pulling back with a flustered grin. God, you're such a sap. This is the best gift ever. Thank you. Thank you, Keigo. He held out the necklace, unclasping it and turning. Help me with the lock? Hawks just grinned back, dopey, dazed, and delighted. Of course. They got up a few minutes after, heading down to start packing away the few things of Dobby's they were taking. Ogawa had said they weren't allowed to take anything that belonged to the hospital, but things like drawings, self-purchase items, etc. were good to go. Haruka, with a wink, had whispered they could take the old movies, as no one knew about them well enough to miss them. Dobby had thrown his arms around her, hugging her tightly, to the surprise of most of the people in the room. Aside from Hawks, Dobby tended not to be very touchy-feely, but it seemed he and Haruka had become something of best friends during his tenure. And that wasn't anything to scoff at. Hawks knew. You know, Hawks said, as they worked to put the major bits of the Toby cave into a stack of cardboard boxes. I'm going to miss this place. It was like a shrine to you. Like all the bits and pieces of you were laid out as shards of your life. Toby rolled his eyes. You romanticize me too much, you know. Why not? Hawks questioned, shrugging and slinking over to help box up a puzzle. You were made to be loved, wholly and imperfectly. Dobby flushed hard, turning his face away. I'm still not used to you saying that. Then I should say it more often, Hawks mused. He paused, dusting his hands off on his jeans and peering around. Dobby stood up, stepping to stand at his side and humming. I think that's everything. Hawks paused a long moment, then shook his head. Hold on 1 second, Firecracker. There's one more thing we need. Dobby blinked as Hawks turned, running out the door and down the hall, into the chapel. The mid-morning light piercing through the stained glass, the cool air mixing with kaleidoscope-eyed sunshine. Striding over to the pews, Hawks picked up a Bible, bottle green, leather-bound, and handed it back to Dobby. Dobby looked down, letting out a snort as his eyes flickered over the tome. Sentimental much? No more than you big sap, Hawks teased, and he could tell Dobby was fighting to hold back a fond grin. Right, whatever you say, bird brain. He turned, tucking the book under his arm. Let's pack it up. Besides, it's almost time for my last checkup. Hawks sat in the waiting room, a suitcase at his side, foot tapping anxiously against the floor. Ogawa sat beside him, tail trailing soothingly down his arm, and ears twitching in anticipation as they looked towards the door. Finally, a scuffle was heard, and Hawks jumped out of his seat, wings flaring as his gold eyes met piercing blue. Hawks waited, heart racing. Dobby smiled, eyes crinkling at the scarred corners. Doc says I'm free to go. Chapter 40. Will you still come hang out with us? Hawks asked, as he hugged Ogawa goodbye one last time as doctor and patient, outside the apartment complex that Hawks and Dobby now called their own. Duh, the green-haired nurse said, rolling her eyes. You boys wouldn't survive a week without me. Haruka laughed from beside her, smiling sunnily at Toby. You and I still need to find tickets to that glam rock rendition of Rosa Versailles, if you're still up for it. Dobby nodded enthusiastically, grinning back just as wide. Obviously. I'll hold you to it, Haruka teased, and Dobby rolled her into another tight hug, lifting her a few inches off the ground due to his significant height advantage. Haruka patted his head endearingly, while Ogawa shook her head in amusement at her girlfriend's antics. It was somewhat strange to see Ogawa in just a loose gray zip-up hoodie, dark sweatpants, and worn sneakers. Hawks hadn't expected to end up with friends from this whole ordeal, but it was undeniable that the woman standing in front of him had earned that title twice over. He hoped this feeling, standing in a room and knowing he had friends on every side, would last. Hawks thought he might need it to. Dobby and him ate dinner together, Thai takeout, and a housewarming bottle of wine from Rumi on the bare wooden floor of the apartment. Watching the darkened cityscape outside, a single light hung from the ceiling, and the rest of the space dark around them, save for the roll-up futon they shoved in the corner to sleep on. I have a question for you, Dobby said, between bites of cow soy. Yesterday, Eri mentioned us getting married, having kids. We haven't really talked about that. Hawks blinked, choking a little on his rice. He replied eloquently, wiping his mouth against the back of his hand before satay sauce could drip down his chin. No, I guess we haven't. Dobby fixed him with a considering look. Would you want either of those? Hawks thought about it for a long moment, flushing faintly. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed. Getting married sounds nice, and from an optics standpoint, it definitely showed the public that we're committed. His gaze softened slightly as he looked at his partner with care. Obviously, that's not the main reason I'd ever want to get married, though. If we ever did, I'd want it to be because we want to. Dobby nodded, shoving another bite of noodles in his mouth. Cheeks a rich pink. Yeah, Same here. As for kids, Hawks thought, I wouldn't be 100% against the idea, but I'd want to talk it out a fair amount first. I haven't spent enough time around kids to really get a feel for how I'd be as a parent, you know? He paused to take a sip of chilled wine. We can probably get some of that experience, though, soon, since Rumi and Fayumi are trying for a kid and all. What? Dabi shouted, eyes going wide and coughing slightly as he nearly inhaled his food, and Hawks clapped his hands over his mouth. Oh, shit. Rumi told me a week back when we were out and she was drunk. It was supposed to be a secret. Fuck. Please forget I said that. I absolutely... Dabi just shook his head, staring at his hands. What has the world come to? Hey, Hux interjected, feeling he should defend his best friend. I think Rumi would be a great mom. Yeah, sure she will. She's like mentally stable or something. But me, an uncle? Absolutely not. Dabi shook his head, distressed. Hawks laughed. Personally, being an uncle sounds great. It's like parenthood, but without the obligation to actually pass on any sort of moral lessons or good habits. He raised an eyebrow. I guess you could probably pass for wine aunts if it's really that disturbing. I guess, Dabi accepted, begrudgingly, still not looking happy. They sat in silence for a few minutes longer, before the sky-eyed villain broke it again. I actually got you something too. He touched the sapphire pendant, clearing his throat before continuing. I don't know if it's too soon, but... Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a box, sliding it across. Hawks opened it, eyes widening as he saw a small black banded ring sitting inside. He swallowed hard. Is this an engagement ring? Is that what the marriage talk had been for? What? Dabi's eyes widened, flushing red. No, obviously not. It's... He hesitated again, glancing away. A couple's ring. I think they call it a promise ring in America. Tomer and Natsu, though I still refuse to acknowledge them as anything vaguely couple-like. Wear them. I just thought that possibly on two other people who were a couple and also not my brother, it could be cute, kinda, if you had to call it that. He was looking anywhere but Hawks at this point, shoulders hunched, and Hawks could only laugh. Aww, didn't take you for such a sap, Toya. Dabi turned redder, if that was possible, hands going up to hide his cheeks. I cut off my goddamn hair for you. I'm plenty romantic. Never said you weren't. Hawks chuckled, holding out his hand. Now put the damn ring on me. The suspense is killing me. If you keep being annoying, I might just let it. Dabi grumbled, slipping the cool metal over Hawks' ring finger, before doing the same for himself with a matching one. Hawks brought it up to the light, inspecting it closer. It was basic, not ornate enough to really be mistaken as a genuine engagement ring, but had a thin line of red stone running through the center of the band. He could see a matching thread of blue running through Dabi's as it caught the light, and smiled. Thanks, he said, meaning it from every fiber of his being. Don't mention it, Dabi growled, still sounding adorably flustered. Welcome to our new life, Dobbs, he announced, leaning back on his hands. We made it. Dabi looked up, looking vaguely surprised. He blinked, white lashes catching in the low yellow glow of the single bulb. Then he looked away, gaze flitting to scan the night sky outside, trailing through the stars as if he was split between them, between the vast empty world beyond and the comfortable place he'd found at Hawks' side somehow. Hawks knew exactly how that felt. He felt it for months. As he reached out, interlocking their fingers against the smooth wooden floorboards, he wondered if that's what glued them together, both being a bit lost in the stars, in the endless sky beyond, if some part of them had gotten lost wandering rainy streets on the same day, never to come back, but somehow found each other for company in their lonely stroll. He thought he might like that, to follow Dabi through the stars, taste the velvet night with hands clasped tightly together, lit by city lights and distant constellations. One day, he mumbled when they finally got ready for bed an hour or so later. I'm going to propose to you with one of those. Hawks pointed a hazy talon towards the sky, and Dabi squinted. Huh? One of the rings, from Saturn, Hawks clarified, humming in approval as Dabi combed fingers through his hair. I'm not sure if it quite works like that, Dabi replied softly, voice low and lulling. But I appreciate the thought. Said Hawks, already half lost in the abyss. The next day, the team they'd assembled to help with move-in came over, comprised of Midoriya Izuku, Todoroki Shoto, Bakugo Katsuki, Tomura, Eri, and a rosy-cheeked girl who Hawks vaguely recognized from his teaching stint. Sorry for the extra hands, Midoriya said, scratching at the back of his neck sheepishly. I know you didn't ask for Kachan, but he's really strong, and Ochako's quirk will just make this go a lot faster. So that was the girl's name. Hawks noted that down, nodding. If you were worried about too many hands, you could have gone without bringing the crusty freak. Dabi scathed, glaring at Tomura. Hawks sighed. The insult didn't hold much weight anymore, since with no actual disembodied hand to cover her face, and hair and face looking recently washed, the ex-villain was kind of pretty. Hawks knew he wasn't the best judge of attractiveness when it came to women, but he could see why Natsu liked her. But either way, no one in the world would compare to how gorgeous Dabi looked, even when he was being unnecessarily hostile to his brother's girlfriend. Midoriya blinked, seeming momentarily confused, then laughed. Oh, yeah, I guess not. I just thought I should have someone here to help watch Eri. He paused, seeming to consider the most polite way to say it. Don't have complete faith that Kachan would be responsible. What did you say, you damn nerd? The blonde bellowed, apparently having been eavesdropping. Hawks just nodded as Midoriya went white as a sheet, giving a few finger guns before turning to escape before he got any of his precious feathers caught in the impending conflict. Dabi followed, snorting and shaking his head. Hey! Ochako approached, grinning, and glancing between them. Dabi and Hawks, right? Or should I call you Takami and Todoroki? Dabi scrunched his nose. Toya, if you must. I don't want my old man's name anywhere near this. Ochako just laughed, sticking out her hand. Right. I'm Uraraka Ochako. You can call me Uravity if you want. That's my hero name. Punny. I like it. Hawks complimented, and she flushed, grinning as he shook her hand. They first went to Hawks' old place, shoving everything into boxes and carrying them from the elevator down to the first floor, before finally loading them into the moving truck. Eri followed them around, sitting on the back of the truck and pointing out places where boxes could be stacked. Uraraka's quirk did come in handy. Midoriya was right, and Shoto and Midoriya worked naturally together. Bakugo and Uraraka seemed to make a game out of it, Bakugo using small explosions to propel objects through the air that Uraraka had levitated. Points were awarded the less damage done to the object, though Dabi had started slipping them $1 for every piece of Endeavor merch that accidentally got dented or scratched up. Hawks pretended not to notice. It wasn't like he planned to keep much of it anyway, knowing what he knew now, and Dabi had earned the right to be a bit petty. After that was finished, they drove across the city to the new place, and began the whole process again. After a quick lunch, sitting in the back of the open moving truck. You've got a nice place, sir, Izuku said, through a bite of yakitori. Thanks for letting us help. I'm not thanking you for shit, Bakugo grumbled, from where he was texting someone, lips occasionally pulling into a faint smile. I gave up my whole Sunday to do unpaid labor for you nerds. I should be the one getting thanked for my time. Calm down, kid, Hawks said, nudging the blonde in the shoulder, earning a scowl and a hiss of indignation. We're grateful for you to come, and if you want money, I'm happy to pay up, not any skin off my back. Bakugo huffed, and it seemed Hawks had been right about him simply complaining for the simple joy of complaining. Whatever, he said, turning back to his phone. Ooh! Uraraka chirped, leaning over to get a look at his screen. Who are you talking to? Is it Kirishima? Her voice turned more teasing, wicked glint in her round eyes. Bakugo shouted something back, and Shoto and Izuku glanced up from where they had their heads together, deep in conversation. Hawk shook his head, exchanging an amused look with Dabi. "Crazy kids," he mouthed, and Dabi rolled his eyes. "You're the one who wants to be a teacher." "Yeah," said Hawks, looking back at the teens. "I am, aren't I?" But he was smiling fondly all the same.